Picture a quiet Sunday morning. You have just stepped out of the shower and you sit down on the edge of the bed to pull on your socks. But you stop. You glance down at your feet and you notice what you have been quietly ignoring for a while now. Maybe the skin on your heels looks rough and cracked. Maybe one or two of your toenails have gone a little yellow or thickened up along the edge. Maybe there is just a persistent smell no matter how much you scrub. It is nothing dramatic. It is not an emergency. But it nags at you, the way small things do when you have lived long enough to know that small things have a way of growing. And here's the honest truth about foot problems like these. They are incredibly common, especially once we pass our 50s. The skin changes. Circulation is not quite what it was in our 30s. We may spend more time in closed shoes. And the fungi and bacteria that cause things like athlete's foot, nail discoloration, and persistent odor take advantage of all of that. The question most folks ask is, what do I buy to fix this? And I want to gently push back on that framing, because in my experience, the answer is usually not something new. It is something most of us already have under the bathroom sink. If you want a deeper look at the full foot care approach I recommend, there is an ebook linked in the description below. It goes into more detail than I can cover here, so have a look when you get a chance. I want to talk to you today about hydrogen peroxide. Not the fancy kind, not some overpriced brand with a clever label. The plain brown bottle from the drugstore shelf. The one that costs about $1. And I want to share a method of applying it to your feet that draws on the kind of careful, patient, traditional approach to everyday health that has always made sense to me. Not a gimmick, not a fad. Just a simple, time-tested tool used thoughtfully. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what hydrogen peroxide does when it meets the skin and tissue of your feet. You will know how to do a proper foot soak, how to target nail fungus, how to address foot odor, how to help cracked and hardened heels, and how to handle athlete's foot. You will also know what mistakes to avoid, because there are a few, and they matter, and I will tell you plainly what I think works, what I think is overhyped, and why this one humble bottle deserves a permanent place in your routine. Let's start with what hydrogen peroxide actually is, because I think understanding the tool makes you more confident using it. The standard bottle you find at any pharmacy is a 3% solution. That means 3% hydrogen peroxide and 97% water. When that solution makes contact with organic material, whether that is skin, bacteria, or fungal tissue, it breaks down and releases oxygen. That is the fizzing you see. That foam is not magic, but it is doing real work. The oxygen disrupts the cellular environment that microorganisms need to thrive. It does not kill everything instantly, but it creates conditions that are unfriendly to the kinds of bacteria and fungi that set up shop on our feet. Now I want to be clear about something. Hydrogen peroxide is not going to cure a severe fungal infection on its own. If you have thick, deeply discolored nails that have been that way for years, you may need a prescription treatment, and there is no shame in that. But for early-stage problems, for ongoing maintenance, and for general foot health, hydrogen peroxide at 3% is a genuinely useful tool. What I keep coming back to is that the simple things work when you use them consistently and correctly. And most folks never use them correctly because nobody ever took the time to explain the details. Let me walk you through the approach, step by step. And I will be as specific as I can about amounts and timing, because the details are where most people go wrong. The foundation of everything I'm going to describe is the foot soak. This is where the Japanese tradition of careful, regular foot bathing really shines. In many traditional approaches to daily health, the feet are treated as a site that deserves deliberate attention, not just a quick rinse in the shower. A proper foot soak loosens dead skin, softens hardened areas, opens up the small crevices where bacteria and fungi hide, and gives the hydrogen peroxide direct access to problem areas. Here's how I recommend doing it. Fill a basin with warm water. Not hot, warm. Hot water can actually irritate already stressed skin and worsen cracking. You want the water comfortable enough that you can rest your feet in it for 15 to 20 minutes without discomfort. To that basin of warm water, add roughly half a cup of standard 3% hydrogen peroxide. If your basin holds about a gallon of water, that ratio works well. The solution is diluted enough to be gentle on healthy skin, while still being effective on the problem areas. Soak both feet for 15 to 20 minutes. While they are soaking, you may notice light fizzing around areas of rougher skin or between the toes. That is normal. That is the peroxide doing its job. After the soak, dry your feet thoroughly, and I do mean thoroughly, between every toe, along the sides, the heel. This drying step is not optional. Fungi need moisture to survive, so leaving any dampness behind can undo some of the good you just did. A clean cotton towel works fine. Take your time with it. I recommend doing this soak 2 or 3 times per week for the first month, then dropping back to once a week as a maintenance habit. It costs almost nothing and takes less time than an episode of your favorite show. Now let's talk specifically about nail fungus, because this is what brings a lot of folks to this topic. Nail fungus, which shows up as yellowing, thickening, or brittleness in the toenails, is frustrating precisely because it is slow-moving in both directions. It takes time to develop, and it takes time to treat. I have watched folks buy expensive, over-the-counter treatments, spend real money on them, and give up after 2 weeks because they did not see dramatic results. The truth is that no treatment, including prescription ones, works quickly on nail fungus. The nail has to grow out. That takes months. Hydrogen peroxide used consistently as part of your soak routine reaches the nail bed and the tissue under and around the nail, where the fungus lives. After your soak, when the nail is softened, you can also apply a small amount of 3% hydrogen peroxide directly to each affected nail using a cotton ball or a cotton swab. Press it gently against the nail and the surrounding skin, and let it sit for about 5 minutes before rinsing. Do this after every soak. The key word there is consistency. I will be honest with you. If you do this for 3 weeks and then forget about it for a month, you are not going to see much progress. But if you are patient and steady with it over several months, many folks do see real improvement, especially in early to moderate cases. Track your progress by looking at the new nail growth coming in at the base. That is where you will see the change first. Next, foot odor. This is one of the things people are most embarrassed to talk about, but it is enormously common, and the cause is almost always bacterial. The skin of the feet, especially between the toes and on the sole, provides a warm, often moist environment where certain types of bacteria produce compounds that smell. Hydrogen peroxide, because of its antimicrobial properties, can significantly reduce that bacterial load. The soak routine I described handles a lot of this on its own. But if odor is your primary concern, you can add one additional step. After your soak and after you have dried your feet completely, apply a light wipe of undiluted 3% hydrogen peroxide to the soles and between the toes using a cotton pad. Let it air dry for a minute or 2 before putting on socks. This brief contact gives the peroxide time to act on the surface bacteria without the dilution of the soak. In my experience, people who stick to this routine for a few weeks notice a meaningful difference. It is not instant, but it is real. And it costs a fraction of what specialty foot deodorant sprays or powders run. A bottle of 3% hydrogen peroxide at your local pharmacy is around $1. You will use a fraction of it per treatment. The math takes about 2 seconds to work out. This brings me to cracked heels, which are both a comfort issue and a health concern that many folks over 50 deal with. When the thick skin on the heel becomes too dry and too hard, it splits. Those cracks can be painful, and if they go deep enough, they can become entry points for infection. Most people reach for thick creams, and while good moisturizers do help, they work better on skin that has been properly prepared. The foot soak itself is your preparation. Warm water and hydrogen peroxide soften that thick outer layer of dead skin so that when you follow up with a gentle pumice stone or foot file, you are working with the skin rather than against it. After your soak, while your feet are still slightly damp, spend a couple of minutes with a pumice stone on the heel. Then, dry thoroughly and apply a good moisturizer, something simple and unscented. Straight petroleum jelly works remarkably well, and put on a pair of clean cotton socks. If you do this in the evening, the overnight contact gives the moisturizer time to absorb properly. The hydrogen peroxide in this context is not doing the moisturizing. It is doing the cleaning and the softening preparation that allows everything else to work better. That is a pattern I want you to notice across this whole routine. The peroxide is the foundation layer. It clears the field. If you want the full breakdown of how to build this into a weekly foot care routine, including the sequencing I just described for cracked heels, the ebook linked in the description below lays it all out step by step. Now let's talk about athlete's foot. This is a fungal infection, specifically Tinea pedis, and it typically appears as itching, burning, and peeling skin between the toes or on the sole. It is contagious, it thrives in warm, moist environments, and it is one of the most common skin conditions in adults. I want to be honest with you here. Hydrogen peroxide is a useful part of managing athlete's foot, but it works best as a regular preventive and early intervention tool, rather than as the sole treatment for a well-established infection. For early signs, that persistent itch between the toes, slight redness, a little peeling, the soak routine with hydrogen peroxide can be quite helpful. After your soak, dry extremely well between the toes, and apply that direct cotton pad wipe of 3% solution specifically to the affected area. Let it bubble for a minute, then let it dry. Follow this with a small amount of antifungal cream if you have one. The hydrogen peroxide helps clean and reduce the microbial load, and the antifungal addresses the infection more directly. For footwear, this matters more than most people realize. Rotate your shoes so they have at least 24 hours to dry out between wears. Consider sprinkling baking soda or a little cornstarch inside them to absorb moisture. Change your socks daily or more often if your feet tend to perspire. None of this is complicated. It is just the careful, consistent kind of maintenance that makes the difference over time. If your athlete's foot does not respond after a few weeks of consistent treatment, see a doctor. There is nothing heroic about struggling alone with a treatable infection when a short course of prescription medication can resolve it. Now I want to spend some time on what not to do, because I see folks make mistakes with hydrogen peroxide that range from harmless to genuinely counterproductive. The first is using a higher concentration than 3%. Some folks think if 3% works, then 12% must work 4 times as well. That is not how this works. Higher concentrations can damage healthy skin tissue, cause chemical burns, and actually slow healing by destroying the good cells along with the bad. 3% is the right choice for skin use. Full stop. The second mistake is overusing direct application on broken or raw skin. If you have open wounds on your feet, deep, painful cracks, or any kind of skin condition that has broken the surface significantly, check with a healthcare provider before using peroxide on those areas. Third, some folks add hydrogen peroxide to very hot water, thinking the heat will boost its effectiveness. What actually happens is that high heat causes the peroxide to break down much faster before it can do the work you want it to do. Stick to warm water. And fourth, I want to address the myth that you can simply pour peroxide on your feet once and be done with it. I have watched folks try this and then declare that hydrogen peroxide does not work. What does not work is a single application of anything on chronic foot problems. The consistent, repeated routine is the mechanism. 1 soak is a good start. 20 soaks over 2 months is a real treatment. There is a reason traditional approaches to health in many cultures emphasize ritual and repetition. Not because there is magic in the ritual, but because the repetition is what actually delivers the benefit. The way I see it, that patient and steady approach is itself a kind of wisdom that gets overlooked in a world that wants a one-time fix. I also want to mention a few things that combine well with the hydrogen peroxide routine. Apple cider vinegar is one. Some folks alternate between a hydrogen peroxide soak and an apple cider vinegar soak, since vinegar creates an acidic environment that fungi also find inhospitable. If you try this, do not mix them in the same basin. They can neutralize each other. Use them on separate days. Tea tree oil is another option that has a long tradition of use for foot health. A few drops added to your soak water or applied directly with a cotton swab can complement the peroxide routine. It has its own antimicrobial properties, and many people find the scent pleasant. Again, consistency is the key. A drop of tea tree oil once in a while does little. A steady routine over weeks does quite a bit. And baking soda, humble old baking soda, is worth keeping in your foot care toolkit. A handful added to your soak water softens skin, helps with odor, and raises the pH of the water in a way that many microorganisms find uncomfortable. It pairs well with hydrogen peroxide, unlike vinegar. The whole routine I am describing, a basin of warm water, some hydrogen peroxide, a pumice stone, a good towel, a cheap moisturizer, takes about 30 minutes and costs nearly nothing. Compare that to specialty foot creams, medicated sprays, or professional pedicures, and the savings over a year are genuinely significant. I am not against professional foot care. For people with diabetes or circulation issues, professional podiatric care is important, and I would never suggest skipping it. But for the ordinary foot challenges most healthy adults face, this approach handles an enormous amount of the work. If you have found this useful and you want to keep learning this kind of practical, no-nonsense approach to everyday health and home care, consider subscribing to this channel. We cover topics like this regularly, and I always try to give you the kind of straight talk you can actually use. The community here is made up of folks who think the same way you do, and I read the comments and answer questions. Let me bring this together before we close. We talked about what hydrogen peroxide is and how it actually works on the skin. We went through the proper soak method, the right concentration, the right water temperature, and the right timing. We covered nail fungus and why patience is the only real strategy that works. We addressed foot odor and its bacterial cause. We talked about cracked heels and how to prepare the skin properly before moisturizing. We covered athlete's foot and when to step up to stronger treatment. We went through the mistakes that reduce effectiveness. And we looked at a few natural companions that can round out the routine. None of this is complicated. None of it costs much. And all of it has been used by careful people for a long time because it works when you are steady about it. There is no money in teaching you to use a $1 bottle of peroxide correctly. That is exactly why nobody in a pharmacy is going to suggest it. So here is your simple plan. This week, pick up a bottle of 3% hydrogen peroxide if you do not already have one. Set up your basin and do your first soak. This month, commit to 2 or 3 soaks per week. By the end of the month, dry cracked heels. Notice whether that persistent odor has shifted, and look at the base of any affected nails for new, healthy growth coming in. Give it that full month before you decide what you think. Before I go, there is an ebook in the description below that walks through the complete foot care routine in detail, including a simple weekly schedule you can follow. Take a look if you want something to refer back to. Leave me a comment below and tell me what brought you to this video. Have you tried hydrogen peroxide for your feet before? Did someone pass this kind of home remedy down to you? I genuinely enjoy hearing from folks, and your experience might help someone else who is reading along. Next time, I'm going to talk about what happens when you put apple cider vinegar on your feet every night for a month. You might be surprised what changes and what does not. Take care of your feet. They have carried you a long way, and with a little steady attention, they will carry you a good while further. I will see you in the next one.